Welcome. Tonight the rain will be your companion, and these stories will be your guide into the unknown. Sit back, relax, and let the darkness take over. You ever book a getaway just to escape the noise of life? No phones, no work, no endless scrolling. Just you, nature, and someone you love. Well, that's exactly what this couple thought they were signing up for. And trust me, the ending is the kind you'll never see coming. So, there's this young guy and his fiancée. They'd been working non-stop, feeling burned out, and thought, why not just disappear for a weekend? No distractions, no technology, just a cozy little cabin in the woods. He searched online and found what looked like the perfect place. It was tucked away, surrounded by forest, but not so far from the city that it felt completely isolated. The listing photos showed this sleek, modern cabin. Big windows, wooden walls, everything you'd expect from one of those dream getaways you see on Instagram. So he booked it, paid online, and when the weekend came, they packed their bags, jumped in the car, and headed off. When they finally pulled up, the owner was there waiting for them. At least, that's who he said he was. He looked to be in his early 30s, friendly enough. He gave them the whole walkthrough, how the cooling system worked, the security lock, handed them the key, and then left. And at first, everything was perfect. The first day felt like a dream. They changed into swimsuits, went down to the nearby lake, swam until they were exhausted, lay out in the sun together. Afterwards, they headed back, showered, cooked dinner, laughed over a silly board game of Monopoly, and even ended the night with a romantic movie. But then something strange happened. She noticed a piece of her clothing had gone missing. Nothing dramatic, just a small piece, but you know that gut feeling when something's off? She searched everywhere, her bag, the bathroom, under the bed. Nothing. He tried to calm her down, said she probably misplaced it, but she couldn't shake the unease. And here's where the night took a darker turn. Later that evening, while she was in the bathroom, she suddenly screamed. Loud. The kind of scream that makes your blood freeze. He ran in, thinking maybe there was a spider or something, but what he saw made his stomach drop. She was pointing at the wall. At first, it looked like nothing, just wallpaper. But when he stepped closer, he saw it. A section of the wallpaper wasn't sticking right, and when he tapped it, it didn't sound solid. It sounded hollow. He peeled a bit back, and behind it wasn't a real wall at all. Just a thin wooden board. Something inside him said, "Don't wait to find out." He grabbed her, snatched his phone and the car keys, and they ran full speed out of that cabin. They didn't even stop to pack their bags. Straight into the car, straight to the nearest police station. And what the police found when they went back with him, that's when the real nightmare began. Behind that flimsy wooden wall was a secret room. Small, cramped, but packed with equipment. Dozens of surveillance monitors, all connected to tiny hidden cameras scattered throughout the cabin. The bathroom, the bedroom, even the living room where they'd been laughing, playing, thinking they were safe. Their entire day had been watched. Recorded. The police later discovered that the cabin didn't even belong to the man they'd met. It was owned by a wealthy older gentleman who hadn't visited in years due to poor health. A homeless drifter had broken in, taken over the place, and converted it into his own twisted operation. He'd set up the hidden room, installed cameras, and recorded every couple, every family, every person who rented the cabin, then sold the footage to underground websites. It had been going on for months, maybe years. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first heard this story, I got goosebumps. Because think about it. The couple wasn't imagining things. That missing piece of clothing? Probably taken by the guy to, keep as a trophy. The cabin had been a trap. Not haunted, not cursed. Just something even worse. And here's the part that gets me. They'd laughed, they'd danced, they'd shared private moments in what they thought was their safe space. Meanwhile, someone had been sitting just a few feet away, watching. In the end, the website they booked through gave them a refund and apologized. The police filed an official report, and they did recover some of the recordings. But here's the thing. Once something's online, is it ever really gone? So the next time you rent a cabin or even a hotel room, take a second to look around. Tap the walls, check the smoke detectors, cover that weird glowing red dot on the TV. Because honestly, you'll never really know who's watching. And I've got to ask you this. Would you still stay in a cabin like this if you found out something was a little off? Or would you leave everything behind and run like they did? Let me know in the comments. Take a breath, drink something warm, but don't look behind you just yet. Imagine this. Your house is burning to the ground. Flames devour everything you've ever owned. Your furniture, your photos, your memories, reduced to ash in minutes. And when the fire brigade finally extinguishes the inferno, you walk through the wreckage, coughing through smoke, trying to recognize the remains of your life. But then, you see it. Hanging on the blackened wall, untouched by flames, is a painting. A painting of a young boy. His sad, tearful eyes stare at you through the soot, pristine and untouched, as though the fire had never dared to touch him. This is the story of the crying boy painting curse, one of Britain's most chilling modern legends. A tale of art, fire, and a mystery that has terrified families for decades. The legend begins in the 1950s. Italian painter Giovanni Bragolin, sometimes known as Bruno Amadio, created a series of paintings depicting sad, tearful children. His most famous work became known simply as The Crying Boy. The painting showed a young boy with tears streaming down his cheeks. Hauntingly realistic, unsettling in its sadness. Copies of this painting were mass-produced and sold across Europe. By the 1970s and 80s, thousands of homes in Britain displayed this artwork. For many working-class families, it became a strangely common piece of decoration. But while it may have seemed harmless, something sinister lurked behind those sorrowful eyes. In 1985, the Sun newspaper in the UK published a shocking story. A family's home had burned down completely, destroying everything they owned, except one item. The Crying Boy painting. The article suggested the painting was cursed, and soon, other stories emerged. Families across Britain began reporting eerily similar events. Homes destroyed by fire. Possessions reduced to ashes. And yet, the Crying Boy painting always survived, untouched, unsinged. Firefighters themselves were quoted, saying they repeatedly found the painting at the scene of house fires, perfectly intact amidst the devastation. The more the press wrote about it, the more widespread the panic became. The legend spiraled out of control. Some claimed the boy in the painting was an orphan from Madrid, whose parents had died in a fire. Others whispered he had been cursed, doomed to bring flames wherever he appeared. Rumors spread that the painter, Bragolin, had made a deal with the devil, or that the boy himself had been abused and neglected, his sorrow forever captured in the cursed canvas. Soon, no one wanted the painting. People begged newspapers to take theirs away. Others burned them in public bonfires, terrified of what might happen if they kept it. And yet, The irony was clear. People who tried to burn the painting often claimed it would not ignite. Just like in the fires, it resisted destruction, almost as if it wanted to survive. Of course, skeptics offered explanations. Some experts suggested the paintings were printed on fire-resistant materials, which is why they didn't burn easily. Others believed it was pure coincidence. After all, thousands of homes displayed the same image. If a house fire occurred, it wasn't impossible that the painting might be found intact. But even with logical explanations, the psychological power of the curse remained. Imagine being a firefighter, finding the same eerie face again and again in the ruins of family homes. Imagine being a homeowner, staring at that unscathed painting while everything else you loved had turned to dust. Coincidence? Or something far darker? Many paranormal enthusiasts believe the painting carries energy, perhaps linked to the suffering of the child depicted, or even the tormented spirit of the boy himself. Some claim to have seen the boy move, blink, or even whisper when they stared too long at the canvas. One story tells of a woman who tried to throw the painting away, only for it to reappear mysteriously in her living room the next day. Another claimed that the boy's tears seemed to glisten with fresh moisture when a tragedy was about to strike. The line between urban legend and real supernatural activity blurred, and soon the crying boy painting wasn't just cursed, it was haunted. As hysteria grew, the Sun newspaper offered a solution. In a bizarre publicity stunt, they encouraged readers to send in their crying boy paintings. Hundreds of people mailed them in, desperate to be rid of the curse. The paper organized a massive bonfire and burned the paintings publicly. Photographs of this event showed flames devouring the cursed canvases, though skeptics say it was little more than media theatrics. But here's the unsettling part. Even after the public burning, reports of strange fires and encounters with the painting continued. The curse, it seemed, was not so easily destroyed. Today, the Crying Boy painting has become one of the most infamous cursed objects in Britain. While some dismiss it as superstition fueled by tabloid sensationalism, others refuse to take chances. Collectors of haunted objects often seek out these paintings, claiming they can feel a dark aura emanating from the image. Others say the curse only applies if the painting is hung in the home, that it brings sorrow, misfortune, and tragedy to those who dare to display it. The truth? Maybe it's just a painting, or maybe within those tear-filled eyes lies the sadness of a soul trapped forever, desperate to spread its misery to anyone who gazes too long. So, what do you believe? Is the Crying Boy painting just a cheap, mass-produced decoration caught up in coincidence? Or is it truly cursed? An object with the power to summon flames, destroy families, and survive where nothing else can. If you ever stumble upon it in an antique shop, would you dare to bring it home? Or would you turn away, unable to face the tearful gaze of the boy who just might burn your world to ash? Quick question before we dive into the next nightmare. Where are you watching from tonight? Tell me your city or your country in the comments, and let me know if you're listening in the dark. Tonight, we're traveling back to a small, quiet town in West Virginia, a place where the forests are thick, the nights are long, and sometimes the dead refuse to stay silent. I want to tell you the story of Elva Zona Heaster, a woman whose death shook an entire community. Not because of what happened in life, but because of what happened after. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll be thinking twice about what the dead can and cannot do. Imagine losing someone you love, not to old age, not to illness, but to something violent, something unnatural. And then, imagine that the only way justice could be served was because the spirit of the victim herself came back to speak. Sounds impossible, right? That's exactly what happened in 1897 in Greenbrier County, West Virginia. Zona Heister was young, just 19 or 20, living in a small Appalachian town. She was known for her gentle nature and quiet life, engaged to a man named Edward Trout. Friends described her as joyful, full of life, but also respectful of local customs and superstitions. The wedding was approaching. The community was excited. Everything seemed normal. Until one winter morning, Zona's mother noticed something odd. Zona was dead in her bed. At first, everyone thought it was natural. Maybe a sudden illness, maybe a heart problem. Edward claimed she had fallen ill suddenly. But Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heister, wasn't convinced. She had a gut feeling. Something was off. The body was buried quickly, as was custom in those days, but the mother began having visions, not dreams, realistic encounters. Mary Jane swore that Zona appeared to her in the night. Zona's spirit was pale, sorrowful, but determined, and she spoke. "Mother, I did not die by myself. He killed me." Over several nights, the spirit described in detail what had happened. How Edward had struck her in the head, how he had staged the scene to look like natural death, and even specifics about the location of injuries that only a murderer would know. Mary Jane was terrified, but she also knew. If she didn't act, justice would never come. With a trembling heart, she brought her story to the authorities. At first, they laughed. Ghost testimony? Really? But Mary Jane insisted. Zona had given details that only someone with intimate knowledge could have known. Eventually, the court agreed to exhume Zona's body, and what they found shocked the entire county. She had indeed been struck in the head, and the injuries were consistent with murder, not natural causes. Edward Trout was arrested. He claimed innocence. But the evidence, combined with Mary Jane's testimony of Zona's ghost, sealed the case. The trial of Edward Trout was unusual in many ways. Witnesses spoke of Mary Jane's visions, and the court had to weigh the credibility of a mother claiming her daughter had returned from beyond the grave. But ultimately, the details matched reality. Edward had attempted to cover his crime. The jury convicted him of murder. The Greenbrier Ghost became legendary, not just for the crime, but because it's one of the only cases in U.S. history where a ghost's testimony was considered in a court of law. This story sticks with us because it challenges our understanding of justice, the law, and perhaps life after death. Zona's spirit didn't rest until her murder was exposed, and in a world that often forgets its victims, she made sure the truth was heard. So next time someone says justice can't come from beyond, remember Zona Heister. Sometimes, the dead speak louder than the living. Imagine a simple wooden box, plain, unremarkable. Something you could find at a flea market, tucked away in the corner, forgotten by time. But inside this box lies a darkness so deep, so unrelenting, that it has cursed everyone who dared to own it. Fires, strange illnesses, terrifying visions, and an unshakable feeling of being watched. This is no ordinary object. This is the story of the Dybbuk Box, the most haunted object in the world. They say objects can hold memories. A wedding ring, a family photo, a favorite toy. But what if an object could hold something else? Not a memory, not a feeling, but a spirit. A restless, malevolent entity bound within, seeking release. That is the curse of the Dybbuk Box. Tonight, we'll dive deep into its terrifying history, the lives it destroyed, the legends surrounding it, and why even today, people fear to speak its name. Our story begins in the aftermath of World War II. In Poland, during the Nazi occupation, Jewish folklore whispered of creatures called Dybbuks, restless spirits of the dead, malicious entities that cling to the living, tormenting them until they break. The Dybbuk Box, as the legend goes, was created by a Holocaust survivor as a vessel to trap such a spirit. The box itself was nothing extraordinary, just a small wine cabinet. But what it contained was something dark, something that was never meant to be released. When the woman who owned it died in 2001, her family refused to take it. They feared it. They knew its power. And so, it was sold, setting in motion one of the most chilling modern legends ever told. The buyer was Kevin Mannis, a small business owner in Portland. At first, he thought he'd stumbled across a curious antique. But soon after bringing the box into his shop, strange things began to happen. Lights flickered. Objects moved on their own. Customers complained of an oppressive, suffocating feeling whenever they entered. Kevin himself began to suffer from terrifying nightmares, dreams of a dark figure standing over him, whispering in a language he could not understand. When he tried to give the box as a gift, every recipient returned it in fear. One woman described a shadow following her wherever she went. Another claimed she woke up to the smell of burning hair and sulfur. Kevin finally realized this was no ordinary antique. This was a prison, and something inside was clawing to get out. In 2003, Kevin did what many of us might do in desperation. He sold the box on eBay. His description was chilling. He warned that the box was haunted, that it destroyed his life, that no one should ever buy it. But of course, warnings often fuel curiosity. A student named Iosef Nitsky bought the box. Soon after, he reported his hair falling out, his eyesight failing, and mysterious welts appearing all over his body. His roommates heard strange whispers at night. The smell of cat urine lingered in their apartment, no matter how much they cleaned. Terrified, Iosef too passed the box on. The box next found its way to Jason Haxton, the director of a medical museum. A man of science, Haxton believed the stories were exaggerated, but he quickly realized he was wrong. He experienced choking attacks in his sleep. His skin erupted in painful hives. Electronics around him failed for no reason. And most disturbing of all, he began to see a shadowy figure lurking in his home, following him from room to room. Jason became obsessed. He studied Jewish mysticism, seeking a way to contain the evil. He tried rituals, protective prayers, and finally sealed the Dybbuk box inside a gold-lined wooden ark, locking it away in secret, where he hoped the spirit would remain. But the story doesn't end there. Years later, the box resurfaced again. This time, it was acquired by Zach Bagans, the paranormal investigator known from Ghost Adventures. Zach placed the box in his haunted museum in Las Vegas, where visitors could come face to face with it. The moment it was displayed, guests reported fainting, vomiting, and sudden outbursts of panic. Some claimed they saw a shadow standing behind the glass, watching them. And then came one of the most infamous incidents. Post Malone, the musician, visited the museum with Zach. According to reports, Zach opened the Dybbuk box in front of him. Days later, Post Malone narrowly avoided death in a series of freak accidents. A private plane nearly crashed with him on board. His Rolls-Royce was involved in a serious car accident, and his house was robbed. Coincidence? Or the curse of the Dybbuk box? Skeptics argue that the Dybbuk box is nothing more than an elaborate hoax, a creepy story that grew out of internet culture. They say the nightmares, the visions, the accidents, they're all the result of suggestion, fear, and coincidence. But believers point to the consistency. The same reports of shadows, the same smell of sulfur and decay, the same string of misfortune following every single owner. Could so many people across so many years all imagine the same horrors? Or is this box truly what folklore warns us about? A vessel holding a restless, vengeful spirit. Today, the Dybbuk Box remains sealed, locked away. Many say it should never be opened again, but legends have a way of living on. Stories whispered in the dark gain power, and sometimes, just hearing the tale is enough to let the curse in. So tonight, as you turn off the lights and close your eyes, ask yourself, what if there really is something inside that box? What if it's listening right now, waiting for someone foolish enough to set it free? The Dybbuk Box. Beware the things you choose to own, for sometimes they end up owning you. You know, sometimes art isn't just a picture on a wall. Sometimes it's alive, and not in a good way. Today, I want to tell you about a painting that terrified everyone who looked at it. A painting so strange, so unsettling. It became infamous when it appeared on eBay. They called it The Hands Resist Him, and its story, well, it's one you'll never forget. Imagine a child standing in front of a glass door, a doll beside him, and behind the glass, hands, countless hands, pressed against the other side, reaching for him. That's what this painting shows. But here's the thing. The story isn't about the art itself. It's about what happened to the people who owned it. And I promise, some of what you're about to hear will make you question reality. The painting was created in 1972 by Bill Stoneham, an American artist. On first glance, it seemed almost innocent. A young boy with a blank stare, a doll standing nearby, and dozens of hands pressing against a glass surface behind them. But soon after its creation, stories began to emerge. People who saw it claimed it gave them a feeling of unease, as if the figures in the painting were watching them. Fast forward to 2000, when the painting appeared on eBay, listed for sale by a private collector. Alongside the listing, the seller included a warning. This painting has caused strange phenomena to those around it. The figures may move when no one is looking. Strange sounds have been heard. You have been warned. This wasn't marketing. Buyers reported things that went far beyond simple unease. The first buyer, a young couple, hung the painting in their living room. Soon, they claimed the boy's eyes seemed to follow them around the room. They would wake up to find the doll's position changed, or sometimes it wasn't there at all. Stranger still, friends who visited the house reported seeing the hands moving, almost like they were pressing harder against the glass. Footsteps, whispers, and cold spots began to plague the house. One night, the couple reported hearing scratching at the walls, and when they turned on the lights, the doll appeared in the hallway, though they hadn't moved it. Terrified, they returned the painting to the seller. Another owner reported similar experiences. The boy in the painting appeared to tilt his head slightly every night, and the hands seemed to shift subtly. Visitors to the home felt a compulsion to stare at the painting for long periods. Some even claimed to feel a hand brush their skin, though no one else was in the room. People described dreams about the painting, where the boy and doll stepped out of the frame. They would find themselves trapped in a room full of hands, reaching, grasping, clawing. Art experts have debated the painting for decades. Some suggest it's a psychological phenomenon, the uncanny valley effect combined with suggestion. Others believe it's genuinely cursed. Some claim Bill Stoneham intended to create an unsettling piece, but never imagined the extent of its influence. And yet, the accounts are chillingly consistent. Cold spots, apparent movement, nightmares, disturbing behavior, even unexplained illnesses in some owners. The painting has changed hands multiple times since its eBay listing. Each new owner reports unusual phenomena, though some are less affected than others. The Hands Resist Him isn't just a painting, it's a reminder that sometimes art can reach beyond its canvas. It can touch us in ways we don't understand. Some call it haunted, others cursed. But one thing is certain: if you look too long, if you linger, you might just feel those hands reaching for you. Would you dare hang it on your wall, knowing what it's capable of? All right, gather close, because this one is as chilling as it is tragic. Not because of ghosts, but because it really happened, and it touches on the darkest corners of the human mind. Tonight's tale is about Christine Chubbuck, the TV news anchor whose final broadcast would become one of the most disturbing moments in television history. The warm beginning that hid a storm. It was the early 1970s in Sarasota, Florida. Christine Chubbuck was known in the newsroom for her quick wit, her intelligence, and her no-nonsense attitude. She worked as a reporter and a host for WXLT-TV, a small local station, where she hosted a talk show called Suncoast Digest. Christine was passionate about real journalism. She hated the growing trend of, if it bleeds, it leads, sensationalism in news. She wanted meaningful stories, human stories. But under her strong work ethic and confident presence, there was a loneliness that no one truly understood. Christine was 29 years old, single, and often joked about her struggles with dating. Her co-workers thought it was just humor, but privately, she was dealing with deep feelings of isolation. She lived with her mother, was recovering from surgery, and had been battling depression for years. Even her attempts to reach out sometimes went unnoticed. In her diary, she confessed feelings of worthlessness and that life felt like a constant uphill climb. The day that changed television. Forever. On the morning of July 15th, 1974, Christine came into work like any other day. She looked composed, professional, ready for another segment of Suncoast Digest. But there was something different. Before going on air, she had requested the news script be printed for her, and inside she had inserted her own words, ones that no one else had seen. The broadcast began normally. She read through 3 news stories calmly, her voice steady. Then came the 4th story, about a shooting at a local restaurant. The film reel for that segment jammed in the machine. Christine didn't skip a beat. She looked into the camera and said, "In keeping with Channel 40's policy of bringing you the latest in blood and guts, and in living color, you are going to see another first. An attempted suicide." Before the stunned control room could react, Christine pulled out a revolver, placed it behind her right ear, and pulled the trigger. The broadcast went black within seconds. Viewers who tuned in that morning thought it was some kind of twisted stunt, but it wasn't. Christine was rushed to the hospital, still breathing, but she passed away 14 hours later. Her death shook the station to its core. There was no internet then, no viral clip, just whispers, newspaper articles, and decades of speculation about what drove her to that moment. Her colleagues revealed that just weeks earlier, she had done a news piece on suicide, and even asked a police officer about the most effective method. But even then, no one truly saw what was coming. Christine Chubbuck's story became a grim legend in journalism circles. It sparked conversations about mental health, the ethics of news sensationalism, and how easily someone can hide deep suffering behind a professional smile. Her final act wasn't just a tragedy, it was a statement. A dark protest against the very culture she felt was corroding journalism. To this day, the footage of that morning remains locked away, sealed in the archives, only witnessed by a handful of people. But her story, the lonely, intelligent, fiercely principled woman who tried to fight for real news, still lingers like a ghost in broadcasting history. You know, sometimes the scariest things aren't out in the woods or in some abandoned asylum. Sometimes they're in your own bedroom, right there, staring at you while you try to sleep. This is the story of the Tallman Bunk Beds, an ordinary piece of furniture that became the center of a living nightmare. Imagine buying something as simple as a bunk bed for your children, a gift meant for comfort, fun, and safety. You never think it could watch you, move on its own, drive you to the edge of fear. But for the Tallman family, that's exactly what happened. And the story, well, it gets worse than any parent would imagine. It all started in the 1960s, in a quiet suburban town in the United States. The Tallman family, 2 parents and 3 kids, were excited to move into their new home. The children, eager and bright-eyed, needed new beds. So, the parents bought a large, sturdy bunk bed set, made of dark wood, handcrafted with ornate carvings. At first, it seemed perfect. The kids loved it. Everything seemed normal. But soon, small things began to happen. Little things no one could explain. A parent would hear a soft thump in the middle of the night. One of the children would wake, pale and trembling, claiming they had seen shadows crawling over the walls. At first, they laughed it off. Old house, creaky floors, their imaginations. It must have been. Then the bed began to move, not violently. At first, just a subtle shift, as if the mattress had slid an inch or 2. But the children insisted they hadn't moved, and the noises became louder. Creaks, scratching, whispering voices no one else could hear. One night, the youngest, just 6 years old, screamed so loudly the parents rushed into the room. She pointed at the top bunk, wide-eyed. It's looking at me. No one else saw it. But from that moment, a feeling of dread settled over the room. Every night the children refused to sleep upstairs. They begged to sleep with their parents, and the parents, well, they tried to ignore it, hoping it was nothing more than childhood fear. The Tallmans quickly realized it wasn't imagination. Objects started appearing on the floor that shouldn't have been there. Small toys, personal items, even kitchen utensils. Sometimes items would vanish completely, and the bed, it seemed to react to their fear. One particularly cold night, the father woke to a loud crash. Rushing to the bedroom, he found the top bunk had collapsed, but the children were unharmed. Oddly, the bed was upright again by morning, as if nothing had happened. The mother reported hearing whispers calling her name. The children said they saw shadowy figures climbing the ladder, even though the room had been empty. And still, the family refused to abandon the home. The Tallmans sought help from friends, neighbors, and even local clergy. Holy water, blessings, charms. They tried everything. But nothing worked. In fact, the more attention they gave the bed, the more aggressive the activity became. Footsteps in the night, doors slamming, cold spots hovering around the bed. The children complained that sometimes they could see a face peering from the bottom bunk, smiling, but wrong. Wrong, in a way that made their skin crawl. By the mid-1970s, the Tallmans were desperate. They decided to sell the house, thinking a new family might fare better. But the bed wouldn't leave. Buyers reported being woken at night by unexplainable noises. One even claimed they woke to find the top bunk shaking violently, as if someone, or something, was climbing it. Eventually, the family took drastic measures. They hired a moving crew, and they destroyed the bed, sawed it apart, burned the pieces, scattered the ashes, and for a while, silence. But even years later, family members would swear to hear its creaking, feel its presence in dreams, and see its shadow in the corner of a room, even if it no longer physically existed. The story of the Tallman Bunk Beds lives on as one of America's most unsettling haunted object legends. Some say the wood itself was cursed. Others believe it was an attachment, an entity drawn to innocence, to childhood, feeding off fear. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. Some objects are never just objects, and some nightmares follow you long after the bed is gone. Next time you tuck your child into bed, just remember, sometimes the thing keeping them up at night isn't imagination. Have you ever stumbled across a game online and thought, this is just for fun, right? Tonight, we're diving into a terrifying ritual known as the Midnight Game. It's a story that starts on a Reddit thread or a creepy forum post. But don't be fooled. The consequences are far more real than anyone expected. So, dim the lights, grab a blanket, maybe even lock your doors, and let me tell you what happens when curiosity meets something darker than fear itself. The Midnight Game originated from obscure online forums. Users whispered that it was a ritual game, a test of bravery for those willing to summon the Midnight Man, a shadowy figure who moves when you're not looking, hunting those who dare invite him in. The rules are simple, but terrifying. 1. Write your name on a slip of paper. 2. Prick your finger and let a drop of blood touch the paper. 3. Light a candle, open the front door, and knock 22 times. Step inside and drop the paper in front of you. 5. Extinguish all lights and begin the game exactly at midnight. Do all of this, and you're inviting a dark entity into your home for the next hour. Sounds harmless? That's exactly what makes it dangerous. Reports online describe the first hour as simple, almost boring, until the shadows start moving. Players see shapes flicker in the corners of rooms, doors that were closed now slightly ajar. Footsteps echo in hallways. Some claim to hear whispers, soft, unintelligible, but somehow filled with intent. Others report lights flickering, furniture moving just a fraction, and a deep, oppressive feeling pressing down on their chest. One account from a Reddit user named Melissa still gives me chills. She said, "I thought it was a joke. I laughed until I felt something brush past me in the hallway. I was frozen. I could hear it breathing, and then my candle blew out." Here's the thing. If your candle goes out, you're supposed to relight it immediately. Otherwise, the Midnight Man can catch you. Players report running through dark houses, relighting candles, hiding in closets, or praying silently. Some claim the entity plays with them, whispering taunts or leaving cryptic messages around the house. One player, trying to cheat, stayed in bed the whole hour. When the clock struck 1 a.m., they found deep scratches on their arms they couldn't remember receiving. Their house smelled faintly of smoke, even though no candle had burned down. The scariest thing about the Midnight Game isn't the legends, it's the reports of near-psychotic breakdowns afterward. People report insomnia for days, waking up to find doors open that they locked, or hearing footsteps when no one else is home. Pets act anxious, refusing to enter rooms, and some swear that the Midnight Man's shadow lingers for weeks. There are even stories of multiple players doing it together. Some claim that while one hides, the Midnight Man seeks the others, appearing in mirrors, sometimes behind them, sometimes reflected in the dark, staring but not blinking. Forums are filled with warnings. Never play alone, never play in a new house, never let your candle go out. Despite the warnings, people continue trying. It's the thrill, the challenge, the fear. But these experiences blur the line between imagination and reality. One player wrote, "Even if you don't see it, you know it's there. Every shadow, every creak, it's watching." And that's the part that gets under your skin. The knowledge that the ritual doesn't require belief, just participation, just curiosity. The midnight game is terrifying because it preys on human instinct, curiosity. It turns a normal night into a psychological labyrinth, leaving players unsure whether what they saw was real or imagined. So the next time you read about a ritual online, asking you to invite something into your home, maybe don't. Some games aren't meant to be played, and some legends are more real than you could ever imagine. And one last thought. If you ever hear a knock exactly at midnight and no one's outside, maybe it's not a prank. Maybe it's waiting. Have you ever heard a story so chilling it makes your skin crawl, and then found out it wasn't just a tale? Tonight, we're heading to Staten Island, New York, where a terrifying urban legend about a figure called Cropsey, once whispered to scare kids, became a horrifying reality. Stay with me, because what started as a story to keep children in line would haunt an entire community and shock the nation. Cropsey wasn't always real, or at least, that's what people believed. For decades, children were warned, if you misbehave, Cropsey will get you. They described him as a tall man, disheveled, with wild hair and a rusty hook or knife, lurking near abandoned buildings or wooded areas. Parents used the tale to keep kids away from dangerous spots, especially the old Willowbrook State School, a decaying institution notorious for neglect and abuse. But legends have a way of sticking, and sometimes they attract real monsters. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, children in Staten Island began disappearing. Local kids reported seeing strange men near the woods, peering through fences or hiding in the shadows. One of the most chilling stories involved a group of friends playing near the abandoned Willowbrook grounds. They claimed a figure watched them from the tree line, disappearing whenever they tried to follow. At first, police had little to go on. Missing children were feared lost to accidents or runaway situations, but the community whispered, "It's Cropsey." Andre Rand, a groundskeeper at Willowbrook State School, had a criminal history. He had been fired for inappropriate behavior with children, yet he still lingered near the property. By the mid-1980s, authorities began connecting the missing children cases to Rand. Reports indicated that he had been seen near the playgrounds, abandoned buildings, and local parks where children vanished. The line between legend and reality blurred. Cropsey wasn't just a story anymore. He had a face, a name, and a terrifying history. Police investigations were intense. Families were desperate. Detectives noticed patterns. Children disappeared near wooded areas and abandoned institutions. In 1987, Rand was arrested in connection with the disappearance of Jennifer Schweiger, one of the most notorious cases tied to the Cropsey legend. Evidence suggested he lured children to hidden locations in Staten Island, sometimes using promises or trickery. Witness testimonies and physical evidence were harrowing. The reality of what Rand did to the children, and how long he had evaded capture, left the community in shock. What makes Cropsey so disturbing is how the urban legend became true. What began as a cautionary tale told to children morphed into a real-life nightmare. People spoke of hidden rooms, decaying tunnels, and abandoned buildings where the children were rumored to have been taken. Some victims were never found. Others survived with scars, emotional and physical, that would haunt them forever. The story of Cropsey reminds us that sometimes myths are based on reality, and some monsters hide in plain sight. Andre Rand was eventually convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment for his crimes. Yet, the Cropsey legend lives on. To this day, Staten Island locals tell children about Cropsey, not just as a story, but as a chilling reminder that evil can walk among us unnoticed. Some say if you wander near the abandoned grounds at night, you might hear footsteps in the dark, or see a shadowy figure watching from afar. Cropsey is terrifying because it shows how myth and reality can collide. A tale that began to scare children became a true warning, proof that some monsters are all too real, hiding in the shadows of our neighborhoods. So, next time someone tells you a story about a shadowy figure in the woods, maybe don't laugh it off. Some legends are based on truth. Kyiv, Ukraine, 2006. A young man wanders the streets, staring at the towering glass buildings as if they were alien monuments. He's wearing an outdated jacket, a vintage camera slung around his neck. His expression is a mixture of awe and terror, as though he's woken up in the wrong century. When the police approach him, he hands them his ID. The paper is yellowed, the ink slightly faded. It says, Sergei Ponomarenko, born 1932. Occupation, photographer. The date of issue? 1958. The officers think it's a joke, but Sergei insists he's telling the truth. He says he was out photographing Kyiv with his fiancée when he saw something strange. A massive dark object hovering in the sky. It was silent, but pulsed with a strange energy. As he raised his camera to take a picture, everything went black. When he opened his eyes, the streets looked familiar, but wrong. The cars were strange shapes, the clothes unrecognizable, and the buildings far taller than anything he'd ever seen. The police take him in for questioning. His mannerisms, speech, and knowledge of the city all match Kyiv, but from decades ago. He describes old neighborhoods and cafes that no longer exist. Then they develop his film. Among the pictures of cobblestone streets and 1950s shopfronts, there's one frame that chills the room. A strange, disc-shaped object in the sky. Exactly as Sergei described. Experts confirm. The negatives are real, unaltered, and match photographic methods from the 1950s. Sergei is sent to a psychiatric hospital for observation. The plan is to keep him for a few days. But one morning, his room is empty. The window is locked from the inside. The only thing left behind is his vintage camera, sitting neatly on the bed. Years later, an old photograph is discovered in the archives of a local newspaper from 1958. It's a wedding announcement. The groom? Sergei Ponomarenko. Exactly as he looked in 2006. The article says he had returned from a long trip abroad and was happily married until his sudden disappearance in 1970. To this day, no one can explain how a man from the 1950s walked the streets of 2006 Kyiv, only to vanish again. Some say he stepped through time by accident. Others believe he was taken by the same thing he photographed in the sky. But the truth? It's still out there, waiting for those who dare to look up. The shadows are quiet now, but they'll stir again. Until then, lock your doors and keep your lights low.